Good evening and welcome to the Ombudsman program. My name is Diane Welborn and I am the Ombudsman, and I'm going to be your host for this evening. This evening we're bringing to our viewers a most interesting and timely topic, which is Census 2020. Every 10 years our nation counts all the people that live in our country, and we're going to go through and talk about how that's done, why it's important, and answer any questions that you might want to call in. I'm very pleased to have with me tonight Rachel Gut, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the Dayton Montgomery County Library. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
It's really good to have you here. Rachel is joining us tonight for this because of the special role that our library system is going to be playing with respect to the enactment of this census. So let's get started. Would you like to say a little bit more about the definition of the census? Is there anything you want to add to what it is?
Sure. Well, the point of the census is to make sure that every single person is counted. So it doesn't matter whether they're permanent residents or temporary residents. It doesn't matter whether they're citizens or not citizens. Every single person is intended to be counted for that.
Yes, wonderful. And I guess we'd like to talk a little bit about why it is so important that we get each and every person that is counted. I understand that nationwide there's about $675 billion that is allocated across the nation for various programs based on the census. Do you have something to add on that?
Absolutely, and it is allocated according to how many people are counted in each area. So for Montgomery County, we need to make sure that we're counting every single person so that every single dollar, federal dollar, comes back to our area to be spent on things like housing, education, job programs, all of the different kinds of things that we get federal funding for. For each person who's not counted, we lose money and we lose programs that benefit everyone. There's programs for older adults, programs for children, programs for people who need some additional support, mental health programs, all of those kinds of things that are community services. We lose dollars if people are not counted. So it's just absolutely critical that every single person who lives in our community is counted for the census.
Right, because as you said, it's very important because we lose money that we would have coming into our community if we miss people. So
Right.
that's the point of that. Also, the census gives our community planners information to make plans for the future by knowing how many of us there are here, and something about our demographics too. Right. Would you like to add any more about that topic?
Yeah, so that's exactly what it is. The census gives us an idea of who lives here and what kinds of services we need and for whom. So age-based programs, whether that's children, again, or older adults, people of different ethnic backgrounds. That helps us to understand what kinds of language programs we need. All of those sorts of things are related to the census. So while it's pretty basic in the questions it asks, all that information is used to figure out, you're right, not just who's living here right now, but we only count every 10 years. So for the next 10 years, we'll be using this data to make approximations of who we think is living here, what programs we feel like we need, and again, like we said, what money is coming into those various programs based on who we've counted in 2020. So we won't do this again until 2030.
Right, so we have to get in and get it right now, that's for sure. Another point I think I'd like to make for our viewers is that it really is a civic responsibility to participate in the census. I mean, it is one of those civic acts that's even written into the Constitution that we have to do this. So it's not an option to say no, really, to the census. Did you want to add any more?
Yeah, it's not supposed to be an option to say no. And honestly, the Census Bureau is giving so many options to try to help people make sure that it gets They are able to take it and take it fairly easily. The forms will be coming out in the mail here starting Thursday, the 12th,
Okay.
and people can start to expect their form. It might not come exactly on the 12th, but as of March the 12th, those will start arriving in homes. This year, there are 3 different ways that people can take the census. They can do it online, they can do it by phone, or they can mail in a form. So any of those are options. Part of the reason why the library is involved this year is because this is the first time the census has been available online.
Right.
That people can actually go to the website and take the census that way. And that's part of what we'll be supporting, but we'll also be supporting people who choose to do it by phone or to do it by mail. So
You have 3 options.
we have 3 options.
Okay.
And we want everybody, you're right, to take it.
Right.
And if you know that, if you don't get your form, you know, there are places we can call to make sure that happens. And if people don't take the census by April 1st, that's when the Census Bureau will start sending people out, census workers, to try to make those counts at other places.
Okay. And as far as the library's involvement, well, there's one other comment, one other thing I'd like to say before we get into details about the library's involvement. This information is also used to draw, as we should say, legislative districts.
Absolutely.
So the population count is really important for that as well, because that determines who represents us in the House of
Absolutely.
Representatives in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
And that's very significant for the future as well. So did you want to add
Absolutely.
anything?
Yeah, so we automatically get 2 senators, right?
Yes, of
But
course,
the number
yeah.
of representatives that we have that represent us in Washington, this is how we get that count.
That's
how
how
we right. So this is again critical for our representation as we're thinking about different laws that we want passed, different programs that we want our government to support. This is how we have part of our voice heard. So
Right.
again, like you said, it's something mandated that everybody is supposed to do, but here's another part of your civic duty. Get
Yes,
out there so
that's
that
right.
you have additional representation in Washington.
Right, right. Do you know how the date of April the 1st was chosen for the census?
I don't know how it
Okay.
was chosen, but I can tell you how it's kind of significant. So April 1st is the date on which everyone should have their form. It is also the date on which whoever is living in your house on that day, that's who you count to put in the census. So if they were living there on March the 31st, but they're not living there on April the 1st, you don't count them. If they weren't living there on March the 31st, but they are on April the 1st, you do count them.
Okay.
So there's that piece of it. And that will also be the date that if people have not responded by then, they'll be looking to start visiting.
Start visiting.
Yes.
Let's move to show the first slide that I have for our viewers to see, so they can get a sense for the importance in the, here we go. This is Funding America for 132 programs. So I'm not going to read the slide to you, but you can see that there are a number of programs there which are available for funding that comes from the count of the census. So clean water programs, parks and wildlife, housing, grants to states. These are kind of the block grant programs, and then transportation and roads, which is vital. A lot of us have been driving over roads that have become bumpy over the
Right.
winter time. So I'm going to return to this slide, but I'm being told we have a caller that wants to ask a question about the program. So caller, you're on the air. We'd like to hear your question.
Yes, thank you for taking my question. This is such an important program. I learned recently that the forms, electronic and by mail, that are being prepared for the census are, of course, being prepared by staff members in Washington, D.C., and I don't know how flexible or how nuanced those forms are for localities like Dayton, Ohio. I don't even have confidence in how accurate they may be. So I'm hoping that your guest can speak question of local input into the way in which the census forms are shaped and distributed.
Thank you. That's a very good question, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We appreciate your call. Okay, do you have any comment on the way the census is actually formulated, the questions that are on it?
So I have read over what the questions are. They'll be the same for everyone.
Right.
So there won't be any regionally specific or locally specific questions. There are certain questions they're not asking. So they will not be asking for people's social security numbers.
Right.
They will not be asking if people are a citizen. Those questions won't be there. But again, there isn't anything specific to a locality. They do ask questions like your name, your address, number of people in your household, the ages of the folks in your household. They do ask some race information. Those are the types of things that are primarily on the questionnaire.
Yes.
But I don't honestly know how they're being sent out in terms of, will everybody in Dayton get theirs at the same time? I'm not sure about that information, but I can tell you that the forms are all the same for everyone.
Right. Since it is a national level census, it is a standard form that
Correct.
whether we live in Ohio or whether we live in California or wherever we live, we're going to get the same set of questions. So it really
Correct.
doesn't have any nuanced regionality about the census.
Correct.
What is important to the region is how accurate it is and how it reflects our demographics and our number of people and the ages and the makeup of our community here.
Exactly.
So that's where it gets regionalized. It's
Exactly.
in the answers that our citizens are
Right.
going to give that then it becomes more regionalized.
Right.
So good.
And that data is then used regionally.
Yeah.
It's used by the federal government, it's used by the state, and it is used regionally
Yeah.
to help us figure out. We at the library actually use that data to figure out what kinds of programs should we have, what sorts of focuses should there be, services at we've got locations all over the county.
Yes.
So how do we figure out what's the right mix of programs for Kettering versus Heber Heights versus Vandalia?
Right, exactly. So all of those. If we could go back to slide 1 for just a moment, I wanted to highlight a few of the other programs that this census that we will all be taking, how it comes back to our community, how this $675 billion does come back into Montgomery County, Ohio, through sustainable energy programs and persons with disabilities programs for those individuals, emergency as shelter grants, which help the homeless in our community to get rehoused. It even goes for small business development, and also it goes for Native Americans and tribal programs, and just minority school programs. I mean, it covers such a wide gamut, and this is why we need to get everyone out and get everyone counted for that. I think also education really should be highlighted in the funds that come back for education, the Title I grants that come back, and then also special education grants are funded from this, and the school lunch program, which many children in our community take part in. And then I think most people understand how very important Head Start is to our community. So all of these programs are impacted by the census count. I'm being told we have another caller, which I'm glad to hear. So, viewer, you're on the air. Ask your question, please. Hello?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
All right. Yes, thank you. I have a question about when you're looking at counting the number of people in areas and communities. I was very curious about the homeless population, how they would be counted, people that are in shelters or people that are, in shelters or on the streets? How is the count being distributed or conducted for those, for that population?
That's a very important question. Thank you. We're going to get an answer for that special population. Do you know, Rachel?
Yes, so the census is doing a number of different things. If people live in a group setting, for lack of a better way of putting that, that could be a dorm, that could be a senior living facility, they're being counted there. So for example, I have a college-age daughter. My college-age daughter on April the 1st will be at her dorm, so she will be counted there in the community where she lives. For folks who have a more unstable, maybe home situation, they can be counted if they're currently in a shelter or in a some other type of temporary home situation. They can be counted at that location. They can also come to the Dayton Metro Library, to the food bank, to some other locations that are providing count opportunities. They can be counted there. And they would use as an address whatever address it is that they typically sleep at. So again, if that's a shelter, they can be counted in that space. But again, there will be census workers who go to some of our homeless shelters and work with folks who might not necessarily know how to take the census. And
Right.
Yeah.
And when you mention institutions, those would also include the jail. And it would also include our nursing homes and other assisted living facilities.
Correct.
And all of those will be counted. So the directors of those facilities, or whoever they designate, is going to respond to the census folks to make sure that we get them all counted as well. Yes, we don't want to leave anybody out, so they're going to be out there beating the bushes to be finding everyone. A couple of the other programs that I'd like to highlight that impact our community as well is health care. Because the census count will also determine the funds that are available for our Medicaid program.
Correct.
And it also will determine funds available for our food stamp program, now Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, but it will work for those. It also determines physician fee schedules for the Medicare Part B, and it also impacts the WIC program, Women, Infant, and Children Food Support Program. So it seems like this $675 billion almost touches so much that it really is important for us to get our share here in Montgomery County. And so I'd also like to just let our viewers know a couple of numbers, and then you can comment on these if you have some. In 2000, which of course was the last time, we received $559,062 in Montgomery County to the county. That does not count all of the money that went to different jurisdictions, because we have a lot of jurisdictions in Montgomery County. Dayton alone received $166,179. $1,000 for that program, and then the annual allocation for building up through all the different years went up in Dayton to $256,508,980. That's a lot of money. And Montgomery County in that same period was receiving $968,216 and $340 after that. So there's lots and lots that comes back right here to us. And I'm not even naming all of the 26 jurisdictions that we have, but I think viewers can certainly hear about that. Let's take back to sort of the question our first caller asked about all the different pieces of the census.
Sure.
Of course, they have to have the name of everybody because they want to make sure that people are only counted once.
Absolutely.
So we can't have duplicates like that. And then the people staying in the household, you've already addressed the fact that they are, if they're there on April the 1st, they're counted as being in that group on that day. I can imagine that that there might arise some questions about that, because it might be that they are there for the day, but they're not going to stay there, they're not there permanently. Do you have any particular comment on that?
I think there are going to be a lot of those questions, especially in our community after we had so much tornado damage last May.
Right.
We've got a lot of people who are displaced. And so I think there are going to be a lot of questions about, ooh, where am I counted? If I'm going back to my house as soon as it's repaired, do I consider that my home, or I've been staying with my mom? Is that my home? The best thing to do is, if you're not sure the answer to your question, is to call the Census Bureau.
Okay.
And while I don't have that number with me tonight, your Dayton Metro Library can provide that number for you.
Absolutely.
To call. So that's, I mean, again, I think we in our community will have a lot of questions about my circumstances are unusual because of some of the displacement that happened this year.
Exactly. So why don't you give the viewers the Dayton Metro Library number they should call?
Sure. They should call our Ask Me line, which is 937-463-2665.
Okay. Very good. And we'll probably come back and repeat that if any viewers didn't have a pencil or pen handy right then and there. Of course, they're asking the sex and race of everyone living or staying in the household there to get just those demographics so they know how many people are where and who is there. The age and the date of birth.
Yes.
Okay, again, I understand that in the last census that we had an undercount of young children, and that can have a very negative impact on our communities. And for you at the library, you wouldn't know, if there's 5% more early childhood population in your service area. That would make a big difference. Do you want to say anything else about?
Sure, there are definitely some traditionally undercounted populations, and we want to try to tap into those this year and make sure that we're counting everyone. You're right, children under the age of 5 are typically one of those populations that are undercounted. And when they are, that means we don't get enough money for Head Start. It means we don't get enough money for WIC, for some of the other programs that you mentioned before. The programs that the federal government pays for touch everyone. I may not be receiving WIC at the moment, but clean water is definitely important to me.
Yes.
And each one of those veterans benefits, all of those kinds of things that there's almost literally something for everyone in the census money that comes out. So it's so important that those underrepresented populations do get counted.
Yes. And do you have any idea why we have traditionally undercounted infants? Do you know?
I don't know exactly. I can make a guess that I just think it's, having been a parent, I can imagine that when you have small children like that, the census probably isn't your top priority.
You're busy.
Yeah, you're a busy person. But I think we're trying to make that as easy for people as possible. Again, you can call, you can do the form by paper, or you can do the form online. And our hope is that if you're here for story time anyway, that you'll do it at the Dayton Metro Library.
Well, good. We'll come back to how the library is going to assist on that. Do you have any comment about the question on the census about race? I mean, race is very important in our society, and I know that making sure we count everybody is very significant by race.
Right. Well, I think each of the cultures that live in our nation should be represented so that we make sure that we're providing for everyone in the way that's most culturally appropriate. So that seems like a question. Maybe it feels like in 2020 we should be beyond that question, but we're not. Yeah. And we want to make sure that especially those populations who've been underrepresented, who have not experienced the same equity as some of our other groups, have those options. So we want to make sure that especially those populations who've experienced inequity are getting counted.
Yes, very good. Thank you for bringing that, for answering that part up as well. I also wanted, we also talked about whether they stay there or whether they don't stay there. And there are going to be a lot of individuals who have questions about that, and they can contact the library to get to the census, or if they're in one of the libraries, you will help them call to get that taken care of. Right. And then they also inquire whether the household rents or owns, and I think those statistics are very, very important for our community to know what our rate of home ownership is.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that's an important statistic to know for a number of different reasons. We want to make sure that people have the opportunity, if they want it, to own a home and build wealth that way. And if that's not happening, let's figure out why not.
Right.
And what percentage of renters, that tells us, perhaps it's a little bit more transient in some areas. So again, that's information that we can use to provide appropriate programs and services to people.
Right. And also going back to the planning piece, it can help us go back to that as well. And then the telephone number. The telephone number is on there because?
The telephone number is on the census because people would be able to call in and do their census over the phone, or if they have questions on how they're supposed to answer.
Okay.
Census workers who've been trained would be able to answer those questions. And I know we'll talk a little bit about how the library's involved. Librarians are not census workers, so we are not, in the same way we do not provide tax help. We will help you find the right form. We will direct you to the right people who can get you help. But we're not going to tell you how to do your taxes. We're also not going to tell you how to fill out your census. So that's what the phone number is also there for, so we can connect you with the right people who have the information you need.
Okay, very, very good. And you've already helped us out with the colleges and the institutions and how those are going to be counted so that we don't miss anybody there. Let's turn our attention to some of the confidentiality of the census, because some people might feel somewhat uncomfortable in answering all of these different questions, even though the census is not going to ask income, it's not going to ask Social Security numbers or anything of that nature. But the census is confidential.
Absolutely.
So would you like to comment on that?
Sure. So again, we've met several times with our partners at the Census Bureau, and that's one of the points that they have made very strongly, is that this information is absolutely confidential. Each census worker basically takes an oath that they will never share this information. So if they're actually coming door to door and helping people to fill out the census, they will never share this information. There is no way that the police department, that the library, that anybody else is going to get specific information about people for many, many, many years. I can't remember exactly how far it is, 70-something years before they will release specific, so-and-so lived at such and such an address type thing, and that's more for genealogy research, I think, than anything else. But at this juncture, that information will not be released. They're simply taking the aggregate data and looking at that as a whole. They're not pulling that apart as to so-and-so lives at such and such a place. They'll just be looking at, there were so many people of this age or this demographic in a particular area.
Good. So individuals that have concern about perhaps living in this country illegally, this census will not be used in order to seek them out, or for those where there might be a warrant for their arrest. It's not going to be used for any of this. And also viewers can understand that if they don't want to have a census worker come to their house to take the census with them, they can go online, or they can call in, or they can come to the library and have it done that way, and then nobody's going to visit them.
Exactly. So be proactive. Come early. Yes.
Go ahead and do it.
Get it done.
Let's talk a little bit about our wonderful library system and what the role of the library is in helping with outreach, getting people to come in to do the census there, and what services are you providing to help execute the census?
Absolutely. So our American Library Association is partnering with the Census Bureau directly, and many, many libraries across the country have joined the bandwagon and are all trying to help our local citizenry to make sure that they have the opportunity to participate in the census. And we at Dayton Metro Library started our journey with their recruitment campaign. So the Census Bureau has been looking for workers to help support their efforts, and so last fall we started working with them. We had recruitment tables at each of our branch libraries. We had information about becoming a census worker on our digital signage. And we had some other opportunities on our, as you come in, the computer screens, come up, there was some information there as well. So we really started our journey with them then, and trying to get the word out to each of our staff as to how they can participate and help.
Hold that thought. I'm going to come back because I know there's a lot more, but we do have a caller.
Absolutely.
Hello. Thanks for calling into the program. We're
so
ready
much
for your
helpful
question.
information
Good.
in this program, and reassuring, actually. But I'm aware that responses to the census are used regularly to redraw legislative district lines and to determine the number of seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. Is there anything that your guests can do, or that others involved in the census, to highlight the problem of gerrymandering and the way in which the census report plays into a political structure that guarantees the outcome in elections in an undemocratic way? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. That's gerrymandering.
Yeah,
hot topic.
Yeah, that is a hot topic.
It
It's
is.
absolutely a hot topic, and I think probably part of what we can do is be in touch with our current representatives and make our feelings on that known, that we don't we don't want district lines drawn in that way. While the census information potentially could be used that way, I don't think the Census Bureau themselves unfortunately has anything, or maybe fortunately has anything to do with that. So I'm not sure, beyond contacting your legislator, what to recommend in terms of
that.
Of trying to make sure we avoid that situation.
It's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the census, being the count of all of the individuals, will determine the number of people that are representing this area in the House of Representatives. So I don't know, the drawing of lines is a question for another day, I think.
Yes.
Okay. All right, you were talking about how the library is reaching out to help recruit census workers, making the fact that those jobs are available. Are they still available now, or have they kind of closed their application? Do you know?
I don't honestly know whether they have or not. At this point, though, I wouldn't hesitate to try.
Right.
If you're really interested in being a census worker.
Okay.
But at this point, they're focused much more on getting people to actually take the census.
Right.
So I think I mentioned earlier, March the 12th is the first date that people might begin to receive their census information in the mail.
Right.
And so we're gearing up at the library for those folks who get their forms on the 12th and are very excited about getting them filled out. We'll be helping folks at that point to, if they come in, they can do it online at the library if they feel like they need help navigating a website. Of course, if they have the means at home, they can do it at home too.
Right, exactly. Yes, we have been told we have yet another caller.
Sure.
Thank you for calling in, viewer. We're ready to hear your question.
Hi, yeah, thank you for taking my call. I just have a question here. When I used to be a program director in a nonprofit, I used census data quite a bit to prepare grant applications for funding. And I'm wondering if you or your guest have any idea, any information about when the results of the 2020 census will be available to the public.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for asking. That's a good question. Well, we'll see if we can get an answer here. Do you know when it might have? They talked about results, release of results.
Right. I'm not entirely sure, but I think by the end of the year.
Okay.
So that'll be one of those things I go back to the library and look up. How's that?
Okay. Yes. Yes, because it's a
Call,
lot.
call your local library.
Yes.
I'll give you that number again. It's 937-463-2665, and we will look up that information for you.
Great. I'd like to ask if our staff here could put up the second slide for us, for the viewers to see, and for me to talk a little bit about that. Good, thank you. This are ways in which people can respond to the census this year online, which is the first time that has ever happened. So catching up with the modern time, and options in very many numerous languages. So when one goes online, you're going to see the option to choose your language. Probably some drop-down type menu will come up. And they are informing us that it's going to take, that there are 10 questions, so it should take about 10 minutes. I haven't actually tested that myself. I didn't actually try to take it with pencil and paper or pen and paper, but online is what's very exciting about this particular census. And I'm sure they'll be counting how many people do it online, how many do it on paper, and we'll see how all of that goes. Now, when people come into the library to do this online, whether they have their paper form or whether they haven't gotten their paper form yet, the library staff in all of our branches, how many do we have?
We have 18 branches.
18 branches. So they have all been trained to help people at least access that census and online. And if somebody has a question when they're in the middle of it, how are the library staff trained to assist them so they can get finished to the end?
Sure. So the online part is part of the reason why libraries got involved in the first place, because the government wanted to do it online, and then they were looking for places that had computer access, which libraries do. So that was part of the reason we got involved. As people are working on it, we've got a couple of tools. One is a video that the Census Bureau themselves have put out that is a training on how to take the census. So it's part of the training we've used for staff so that they would walk through it, understand how it works. But it's also something that can be used with a patron too. So the patron can take a few minutes. The video itself is about 9 to 10 minutes long, and it just walks you through every step and every question, tries to help people a little bit with answering the questions, but again, gives them information on if they don't know how to answer that question, who to call to get that information. Okay. So, yeah.
If they're in the library doing it, though, you've got that phone number.
We do.
So that they can call, and then they won't be timed out or anything while they're doing that. They will be able to have their place and keep going until they get the answer and get that completely finished.
Exactly.
Good. Can we see that slide just again? There were a couple of more points I wanted to make about that slide we just had up. Okay. All right. You're invited to respond by mail. And as she mentioned, the 12th is the first day when some or many will be arriving. That, of course, depends upon the U.S. mail to be getting that out. And then phone, you can get a toll-free number, and then there's support for people who need to have an interpreter while they're completing this form. And then finally, door-to-door. But I have another slide in a minute that's going to talk about that door-to-door. People won't start going door-to-door until a little bit after the 1st.
Exactly.
Giving people a chance to respond to that. Did you want to say anything else about what the library has to offer in this piece of the process?
Sure. So I think the other piece that I wanted to mention was if there are people who need to take it in other languages, the library can help them find the right spot for that. And there are phone numbers that we can help people call if they need instructions in another language or need to take, by phone in another language. There are those options. And where, again, while library staff are not census workers and can't necessarily help to answer the questions, we're there to guide people through the process in almost every other way. So we'll help people get on the website. We'll have the website on all of our computers so that it should be right there on our front home page and should be easy to click and get to. But if you don't see it right away, that's okay. Any staff member should be able to show you exactly where it is and help you navigate that piece. If you haven't used a mouse before, if you haven't used a computer before, but you want to try it online, again, staff can give you some quick instructions on how to do that and show you how to navigate the website without looking at your answers.
Sure.
And so, staff will be trained to give a lot of support and help.
It's good. Because I'm not sure, but the format on phones to answer the census is not quite as user-friendly as the format on a computer. Is that correct?
Well, I haven't tried either one, but a lot of times we find patrons who are very used to a phone if you have something like a job application or something like that, it's very difficult to do on a phone, and it's much easier on a computer.
Okay.
So that's part of what.
So
what
you're
our computer's
inviting
there
them
for.
to come on in. If you try it
Yes.
on your phone and it doesn't work,
Yeah.
go to a library if you
That's
don't
right.
have a computer there at home. And the entire access through the library is all through a secure portal going to the U.S. Census Bureau, right?
It's through their website.
Yes, so
Yep,
it's all on their
absolutely. So
website.
it is our public Wi-Fi, but it's their secured website.
Okay, all right. And then I'd like to ask the staff, please, to put up the final slide. Now, this one is a little busy, and I'm sorry about that, but we're right in the green box at this point. You can probably see that. March and April is Census Day, and then in May is when the non-response follow-up is going to begin. So this is kind of, if you go back to the far left side of the screen and where you see the red, that's when they started, which was in 2018, to start pulling all of this together. It's quite a big operation. And then the partnerships, such as the library, began working with the Census Bureau way back in 2018 to get ready for this. But now we're coming into that green box, which is almost at the end. And here it does announce for us that at the end of December is when the counts will be delivered to the president, and March 31st they'll complete the redistricting depending on what happens. So that's kind of a good timeline for us there. So be looking for the mail, or can people go online to do the census as of March 1st, do you know?
They can, as of March 1st,
sorry,
it's
March
April
12th.
1st.
Oh, it's April 1st.
Well,
What is-
so March 12th, the website should be live
Okay.
by then and ready to go. They should wait until they get their packet in the mail, because that does have some specific information to help them log in. But if you lose your packet, it's not the end of the world. Go to the library. We can help you figure that piece out, or call the library if that's more convenient,
Yeah.
and we can give you the numbers to help you with that piece.
Well, there's no doubt that the library has made themselves the go-to place for doing this, and that's really very, very good of you. I'm sure it's taken a lot of resources for the library to train all of their staff, going back a couple of years, to be ready for this big day. Would you like to comment on how you've had to educate people in all the 18 branches about how to help citizens with this census?
Well, we have a wonderful staff, so I think that helps a lot, who are very familiar with helping patrons with various projects like this. We mentioned taxes.
Right.
We have people who come in and need help filling out HEAP forms, the energy
Yes.
and heating forms, and different pieces like that. So from that perspective, our staff, they were kind of nonplussed by this.
Okay.
This didn't scare them too much.
Good.
So mostly what we ended up doing was sending out the information to them so that they had an opportunity to review it. We've sent out information from the American Library Association, from the Ohio Library Association, from the Census Bureau, so that again those pieces could be reviewed, and we've tried to do those in multiple formats. And we've asked managers to make sure that their staff have off-desk time to make sure those things are reviewed and they understand them, go over them, if they have staff who are saying, I feel a little confused or whatever, take some time, let's go back through it, and contact me if there are some issues too, and I'm willing to work with folks on it. So while it sounds terribly daunting to have folks at 18 branches, this is something we do fairly regularly.
Good.
So it's not as scary as it sounds.
Well, you could certainly have a lot of visitors to the library
hope so.
on April the 1st. So what other things have you done to get prepared for maybe just sheer numbers of people coming in on the 1st?
Well, I think we expect that people will come in at various times. So if
Okay.
people come in all on the 1st, that's great, and we should be prepared for that. But I think there'll be some people who come a little early, some people who come a little late. We're making sure that staff have buttons on that remind people to take their census if they haven't done it yet. We'll be putting flyers in all of our reserve books that, again, remind people about the census and let them know what's going on. Anybody who comes in to use a computer, again, that'll pop up on the computer screen to give them an opportunity to take the census if they haven't already done it. So we're doing some of those pieces to remind people. And then again, another piece of it is just making sure that everyone, from folks who shelve the books to me and the executive director, know that it's coming and how to direct people and help people if they need it.
Right. But again, to highlight that you all are not census workers.
We
just
are
want to
not.
make sure the public coming in is very clear about that,
Yes.
even though you are making your resources available to people to do this. Do you, could you tell our viewers an approximate number of computers that are available to help people with, or is that too much detail?
I would have to look that up. I can
that's
tell you that there's about 150 at the main library alone.
Okay, all right.
So each of our different branch libraries have a different number of computers. We have been
Yes.
through a renovation and restoration project, and so those that have new branches probably have more than some of what we call our vintage branches. But even our vintage branches also have laptops. So if every computer is taken, we can get someone set up on a laptop to take the census as
So you're not really anticipating lines?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think people will come at various and at different times, and we'll be able to get people through. Some libraries decided that they wanted to have individual stations that would, this is just the census station and people can kind of line up and whatnot. We decided not to do that. We decided to make every one of our computers available and have the census information right there on it. We just felt like that would be the better way to potentially handle crowds of folks, that we won't have lines. Any computer in the entire building, in any of our buildings, could be used.
Okay, well that's very good for people to know. Do you know of other efforts among other partners that are being made to try to get reluctant people or get the word out or do outreach to try to encourage people to take the census? Because there are a couple of other partners in the community as well.
Absolutely. There are lots of other partners in the community, and I'll be honest, I probably don't know all of them. But I can mention a couple of things. That the Complete Count Committee was working with organizations who wanted an opportunity to participate and weren't quite sure how to do it, or didn't have the computers and some of the other equipment, was working with them on an Adopt a Library program, so that if they had groups of folks who needed transportation to get somewhere where they could take the census, those groups set up a time, provide transportation, and then bring folks to the library. And that where I'm communicating with Nicole Miller, who's the chairman of the Complete Count Committee, to figure out when those times are and make sure that branch manager knows, can bring in some extra staff if need be or whatnot. The food bank is another place where they're looking to have a laptop or computers so that when people come in there, if they're coming anyway to pick up food, that's an opportunity. So there's different groups like that are trying to find some ways, especially to help us pick up folks who will have challenges getting their census taken.
And if any of our viewers want to know about transportation or any of those partners that you mentioned, should they also, again, ask the library?
They can always ask the library, and we will try to find that information for them. Absolutely.
Why don't we give that number again so
Sure.
everyone can at least hear it again?
Sure. Our Ask Me Desk line is 937-463-2665.
Okay.
That's 463-BOOK, if you can't remember the last part.
That's good. Book. We like that. And where is the best place, in your opinion now, for people to call if they're having concerns or some kind of complaint about something? Would that be our local Census Bureau? Would that be the place to?
If they're having a complaint about the census?
Or I don't know, something having to do with they think there's a glitch or somebody's coming to their house and I don't know, you never know what kind of problems people are going to encounter out there, but would it be our local census?
Yeah, I think they would. They can also, there's a frequently asked questions number. I did finally find it.
Okay.
That's 301-763-INFO, which is 4636. And that's a number people can call the Census Bureau if they have questions, if they're not sure, why did my form not come yet? I lost my form.
Dog ate the form.
My dog ate the form,
Everything
right.
happens.
I don't, yeah.
Okay.
Or I have questions and I'm, struggling with something.
Yes,
yeah.
or again, they can call the library and you'll give them this number
Correct.
if they
absolutely
didn't
will.
have a chance to get that down. That's wonderful. Well, this is going to be an exciting day on April the 1st with all of the people coming into the library to do the census and people out in their homes. And you may even get calls at the library as they're completing the form.
Absolutely.
Asking you for information about how to do that, which then you can refer them to the census to get the official answer. Since, as you've said several times, you're not the census workers.
Right.
So yeah, good. And with after the census is finished after April the 1st, or it'll go for, people can still come in for a couple of days after that.
Oh, absolutely, as long as right. So I think you were showing on your chart
the
that
timeline.
The timeline that people will still have an opportunity to complete their census for some time yet. And because it will take time for those census workers. Everybody's not going to show up on the doorstep on April the 2nd.
Right.
It's going to take some time. So if you haven't finished your census yet and no one has showed up your door to take it and it's June, you're still welcome to come into the library. As long as that website is open, we will be open and available to help people.
Okay, and when do you all at the library kind of see this kind of shutting down? In June?
Well, I'm going to say December.
Okay,
I think,
all the way to the end of the year. Okay.
I think, again, as long as they keep the website open, we will continue to help people who've not had an opportunity to take the census yet.
Okay, so you're...
I think, yes. I think it will start winding down June or July. I think a lot of people will take their census in April, and that'll get done. But if they don't, again, as long as the website's open, we'll continue to help folks.
Right. And back to our caller earlier, many, we've mentioned many government agencies like regional planning, Miami Valley Regional Planning Authority, many that use this for their programs, but then there are also many nonprofits out there that use census data when they are applying for grants and determining the number of people they could potentially be serving in a certain area. So it's wonderful to learn that it's going to be completed by the end of the year, so that sometime in 2021 that data will be available for people to use, and that's really quite fine. We're about to end our time here together, and so I wanted to ask if you had any final comments, if there was a question I did not ask you that you wanted me to, or if there's any kind of summary question that you wanted to add for the viewers.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here and to talk a little bit about the census. And this is so valuable to let people know how important the census is, how much tax money can come into our community. And again, it helps everyone. It's not, I think sometimes we start thinking about, it's for that group or this group. The tax money that comes into the community helps everyone. The roads, the clean water, the WIC, the early childhood opportunities. We need to think about how our answers now are going to support us for not only the next 10 years, but as we educate our young children, those young children are going to be adults in 20 years. Yeah. And we want to make sure those young children now, who will be adults in 20 years, have the proper start in education, and the same with all of the other groups that it's affecting. So I just want to thank you for doing this program, because it's really valuable.
Well, thank you. You're very welcome. And thank you to the viewers for watching this evening. And one last plug, look for your census coming in the mail March the 12th or after. It will give you instructions on how to complete it and how to go online. But if you don't have access to a computer, your nearest local branch of your library is standing there ready and trained and able to help you out. So everyone, let's get everybody counted. Thank you very much. Good night.